The galaxy was quiet, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the silence that follows after fire has burned everything down. The silence of fear, and the silence of surrender. The alien empire's fleet had moved across the stars like a storm, leaving broken planets and burning skies behind. They had fought countless battles, and every time, their enemies were crushed. Their armada was called invincible, a tide of steel and fire that no one could resist. And every world that tried to fight had been wiped away. Now they stood as rulers of the stars, celebrating their victories with grand parades that stretched across conquered worlds. Banners of the Empire flew where once there had been freedom, and alien citizens whispered in terror, knowing that no one had the strength to challenge them. The commanders of the Empire believed the war was over. They believed the galaxy had finally bowed its head. In their halls of shining metal, they raised cups of victory and told tales of battles where their fleets had surrounded and destroyed entire civilizations. Every admiral, every general, every soldier of the Empire believed they had seen the end of resistance. Yet in the shadows, far away from their parades and celebrations, whispers traveled from one mouth to another, whispers that spoke of something that had not been seen for centuries. The humans, the Terrans, the lost warriors of a forgotten age. Most dismissed the rumors as myths, children's tales meant to give hope where there was none. They said the humans had vanished long ago. Their worlds burned in an ancient war, their fleets broken and scattered into dust. But there were some who did not laugh, some who remembered stories passed down from old soldiers, stories of human battleships that moved like giants through the void, ships that carried firepower beyond imagination, ships that had once turned battles with a single strike. Those who remembered spoke in hushed voices, afraid that even speaking of them would draw the Empire's punishment. But still, the whispers lived. On the outer edges of the Empire, beyond the shining capitals and the heavily guarded trade routes, there were watchers, scouts, and soldiers stationed to guard against the unknown. Most of them had grown lazy, for the Empire's power was unmatched. Yet even in their routine patrols, strange things began to appear, faint signals caught in deep space, signals that did not match any known fleet. One scout ship reported seeing shadows on their sensors, enormous shapes that flickered and then vanished. The report was dismissed as error. The ship's captain punished for spreading fear, but others began to notice the same. In the grand halls of the Empire's Central Fleet Command, the admirals laughed when the idea was brought to them. They said no ship could stand against their armada, no force could resist the Empire. Their ships numbered in the thousands. Their weapons could burn planets in hours. What was one ghost ship against such power? But their laughter could not hide the unease in their eyes, for deep inside, even the most powerful feared the unknown. And the unknown was what these whispers were becoming. On a remote mining colony, far from the heart of the Empire, workers spoke of a strange signal that cut through the void, not like the usual traffic of ships and stations, but something older, heavier, carrying a weight that none could explain. It came only once, a single burst of sound and code, but those who heard it said it felt like a heartbeat, a pulse in the darkness. The Empire tried to silence it, claiming it was interference, but the miners kept repeating the same words. They said it was human. They said it was Terran. The Empire's officials grew angry at such talk. They punished those who spread the rumor, yet every punishment only gave more life to the story. The people who lived under the Empire's rule, beaten and broken for so long, began to whisper that salvation might be coming, that perhaps the humans had not been destroyed after all. In the taverns of conquered cities, in the quiet corners of space stations, the rumor spread like fire on dry grass, and every whisper carried the same dangerous hope, that the invincible Empire could still be challenged. In the Empire's grand throne world, their ruler sat in a hall of endless light, surrounded by servants and soldiers. When he was told of the rumors, he laughed, his voice booming across the chamber. He said humanity was gone, their ships dust, their people extinct. He declared that nothing could threaten the Empire. But even as he laughed, one of his oldest generals, a scarred warrior who had fought battles no one else remembered, lowered his eyes and whispered that once, long ago, he had seen a Terran ship with his own eyes, and that memory still haunted his dreams. The galaxy remained silent, but beneath that silence, the cracks had begun to form, for in the dark beyond the Empire's reach, something ancient had stirred, something that had once been feared by every power in the stars. The signal echoed once more, stronger this time, carrying across the void, and though no one could yet see it, all who heard it felt the same chill in their bones. The humans were not gone. a battleship was out there, waiting. And the Empire's days of victory were about to be tested. The whispers of humanity spread like wildfire across the galaxy, and no amount of fear or punishment could silence them now. In the darkest corners of space stations, in crowded taverns filled with conquered people, in the hushed halls of alien courts, voices carried the same forbidden words: humanity is not gone. They are coming back. The Empire dismissed the idea. Their leaders declared that the humans were dust, myths, stories of a forgotten age. But every day, more strange reports came. Every day, the shadow of the unknown grew heavier. On the border of the Empire, where patrol fleets often drifted lazily in the void, one small scout ship picked up something no one could explain. Its sensors trembled as a faint signal appeared at the edge of their reach. At first it seemed like static, a simple flicker. But then the pattern sharpened, a code buried deep inside. A code so old that even the Empire's machines struggled to understand it. The captain of the scout ship leaned forward as the signal repeated once. Then vanished. His crew sat in silence, their skin pale, for they all knew what they had just heard. It was not alien, it was Terran. The captain reported the findings to the High Command, but his message was buried, locked away as if it never existed. He was ordered to stay silent, his crew reassigned, and soon his ship was never seen again. The Empire wanted control, they wanted silence. Yet even their iron grip could not keep the story from spreading. One officer told another in secret. One worker whispered to his family. One child overheard and passed it along. Soon entire colonies were whispering the same thing. Humanity was still alive. The Empire's admirals gathered in their grand war chamber, a hall filled with starlight and maps of countless systems under their control. They were furious. Some demanded the execution of anyone who dared to speak of humans. Others suggested ignoring the rumors, saying they were beneath the notice of the Empire. But a few older admirals, scarred and hardened, sat quietly, their eyes dark, for they remembered, long ago, when the humans had stood on the battlefield. They remembered the fear those ships had once brought. They remembered battles where empires much stronger than today's had fallen in fire before a single Terran warship. The Empire's ruler finally spoke, his voice echoing like thunder. He declared that no ghost could threaten them. Their fleets numbered in the thousands. Their armies spanned the stars. No single ship, no matter how powerful, could stand against them. His words drew cheers from the younger officers. But the old generals said nothing. In their hearts they knew the truth. One human battleship had once been enough to turn the tide of war, and if it had returned, then their so-called invincible armada was not as safe as they believed. Meanwhile, across conquered planets, the whispers gave birth to something dangerous: hope. In broken cities where families had long accepted the Empire's chains, people began to look up at the stars with fire in their eyes. Rebels who had been crushed and scattered started gathering again, telling each other that the Terrans were coming. Smugglers carried messages hidden in their cargo. Miners carved symbols of humanity into stone. Even slaves in the Empire's factories began to murmur songs of old, songs that spoke of freedom and fire. On a lonely outpost at the edge of known space, another patrol ship encountered something they could not explain. Their instruments caught the shadow of a massive object, far too large to be a freighter or a fleet. The crew panicked, but when they tried to scan it, their systems went black, lights flickered, alarms screamed. Then in the silence, a low vibration rolled across their hull. It felt like a heartbeat, ancient and powerful. Before they could react, the shadow vanished, leaving only dead silence. The commander of the outpost sent a desperate report, begging for reinforcements. But no reinforcements came, only silence from high command. The people began to believe more than ever. They said the Terrans had heard their cries. They said a battleship was already here, moving in the darkness, waiting for the right moment. And though no one had seen it clearly, every rumor made the story stronger. Children whispered it to each other in the dark. Old rebels swore it was true, and even soldiers of the Empire, hardened and ruthless, began to question whether their victory was as permanent as they had been told. In the palace of the Empire, the ruler sat restless on his throne. The laughter he once carried so easily had grown thin. His dreams were haunted by shadows of ships that should not exist. His generals told him there was nothing to fear. But when he closed his eyes, he could almost see it. A ship bigger than any, weapons glowing like suns, and a voice that whispered across time. Humanity had returned. He told himself it was only fear. But deep inside he knew, the whispers were not just words. They were warnings. Far from the palace, in the uncharted depths of space, a lone figure stood inside a ship older than any other, a ship wrapped in silence and dust, its hull scarred by wars fought centuries ago. Yet its heart still alive, deep within its core, systems stirred, weapons hummed, and engines rumbled like a sleeping beast, for the Terran battleship had awakened, and the galaxy would soon remember why humans were once feared above all others. The Empire's fleets stretched across the stars like iron chains, their banners hanging over every world they conquered. But even the strongest chains begin to weaken when fear enters the heart, and now fear had begun to whisper through their ranks. The whispers of humanity had not faded, they had grown stronger, no matter how hard the Empire tried to silence them. Strange events kept adding fuel to the fire, and soon those whispers turned into stories. Stories of human technology appearing in places where it should not exist. On the planet of Drenek, a world broken and beaten under the Empire's rule, resistance had been all but crushed, the cities burned, the skies filled with patrol ships, the population forced into silence. Yet when an Empire garrison stormed a rebel hideout hidden beneath the ruins, they found something that froze them in shock. The rebels carried weapons that did not belong to them, rifles with a design older than the Empire itself. Sleek black barrels with strange markings, weapons that the Empire's records identified as Terran. The officers tried to dismiss it as stolen relics, but their soldiers whispered among themselves, if rebels carried human weapons, then the humans must still be out there. Reports of similar discoveries soon spread across other conquered worlds, caches of strange technology hidden deep underground, tools that hummed with power far beyond what the rebels could build themselves. A broken drone that carried a core of design unlike anything the Empire knew, its armor thick, its circuits running on principles no one could understand. Everywhere the Empire looked, fragments of human technology began to appear like ghosts from the past, and every piece carried the same message: humanity was not gone, humanity was waiting. The Empire's officials ordered the destruction of all such weapons. They told their people that the Terran tools were cursed, dangerous, forbidden. But their fear only made the rebels cling to them more. A single Terran rifle in the hands of a fighter became a symbol of defiance. One drone hidden in a cave became a rallying cry for an entire settlement. The people who had long accepted their chains began to believe that the invincible Empire could be defeated, if the humans had armed them once. Perhaps they would return to fight beside them again. In the high halls of Fleet Command, the admirals argued furiously. Some claimed that the rebels had found old scrap from forgotten battlefields. Nothing more. Others believed a darker truth, that a Terran ship was moving across the edges of the Empire, leaving weapons behind, lighting sparks of rebellion in its path. The younger officers scoffed, saying no single ship could cause such fear, but the oldest among them said nothing, for they knew that a single Terran battleship had once broken entire armadas, and if one had returned, then no amount of ships would be enough. The rebels of Drenek grew bolder, armed with their Terran rifles. They ambushed Empire patrols, their shots cutting through armor with terrifying ease. Entire squads of Empire soldiers were destroyed in minutes. The survivors fled in terror, swearing that the rifles glowed with a light not of this age. When their reports reached the Empire, they were met with silence. No commander wanted to admit that the invincible armada could be wounded by ancient ghosts. On another world, in the frozen mines of Vika, workers uncovered a buried structure, a massive piece of metal half hidden beneath layers of ice. When they dug it out, they found it was part of a ship, a hull fragment larger than a fortress, its edges melted and scarred from ancient battles. But when they tried to cut it apart for salvage, their tools shattered like glass. The Empire sent scientists to study it, and after weeks of failure, one of them whispered the truth. It was Terran, it was human, and it was still alive with dormant power. The miners began to gather around the fragment at night, touching its cold surface, whispering prayers to the humans who had once flown it. The Empire tried to destroy it with explosives, but when the charges detonated, the fragment did not even crack. The people cheered, believing it was a sign. The humans could not be destroyed, the Terran battleship still lived. The ruler of the Empire grew restless, his throne no longer a place of comfort. Reports piled up before him, signals in the void, weapons appearing, fragments of ships uncovered, and each report carried the same quiet terror. The humans were moving in the dark. The ruler roared in anger, demanding answers, demanding that the whispers be crushed. But even he could not deny the truth. Something was out there, something watching, something waiting. On the farthest edge of the Empire, in a sector long ignored, A small station picked up the clearest signal yet. A burst of power that shook their systems and echoed through every wall. The message was short, but its meaning was clear. A voice older than their empire. A voice filled with iron and fire. "We endure," it said, just 2 words. But those words shattered the illusion of the invincible empire. For if the humans endured, then their return was no longer rumor, it was a promise. Across the galaxy, the conquered rose a little taller, the rebels fought a little harder, and even the soldiers of the empire felt a weight press against their hearts. For no fleet could stop them, until now, until the Terran battleship began to cast its shadow across the stars, unseen but felt, silent but powerful, waiting for the moment to strike. The empire had ruled for so long that even its own people had begun to believe in its myth. The myth of an armada that could never be broken, fleets that stretched across star systems, weapons that could burn worlds, commanders who claimed victory was their destiny. But myths have a way of crumbling when fear begins to gnaw at the edges, and fear had now taken root in the hearts of the Empire's soldiers. For too many whispers carried the same story. A shadow moving in the dark, too large to be a freighter, too silent to be a fleet, something ancient stirring in the void. At the border of the Empire's territory, a squadron of warships was sent to investigate the strange signals. The admirals told themselves it was a minor task, a chance for young captains to prove their worth. But even as they gave the order, their voices carried unease. The squadron slipped through the blackness of space, their engines humming softly, their eyes locked on scanners that flickered with static. At first, all they saw was silence, endless stars stretching into forever. Then one by one, their instruments began to fail, navigation screens went dark, weapons locked without command, comms filled with nothing but static. Panic spread across the ships. On the lead vessel, the captain shouted orders, demanding his crew reset every system. But then, through the massive viewing window at the front of the ship, they saw it, a shape emerging from the void, so vast that it blotted out the stars behind it. Its hull was scarred with burns from ancient wars, yet it carried a presence so heavy that the crew felt their breath catch in their throats. It did not move with the speed of smaller ships. It moved like a mountain drifting through the dark. Deliberate, unstoppable, and ancient. The crew froze in silence as their captain whispered a single word, Terran. The Empire's squadron opened fire, streams of plasma and missiles screaming through the void, but every blast that struck the shadowed ship vanished against its armor. The explosions lighting up its surface only to fade like sparks against stone. Then, with a deep hum that shook the very metal of their hulls, the Terran battleship systems came alive, lights glowing across its massive frame, ancient weapons powering after centuries of silence. The void was filled with a low vibration, like a beast growling in the dark, and for the first time, the Empire's soldiers felt true dread. The Terran ship did not fire immediately, it waited, letting the Empire's squadron exhaust their fury, and when silence returned, when every Empire officer sat trembling in fear, the ship moved. Its cannons shifted with the slow precision of something that had done this 1,000 times before, and then a single blast tore across the void, not bright and wild like the Empire's weapons, but sharp, controlled, deadly. One Empire ship was cut in half in an instant, its pieces drifting silently. Into the dark, the rest of the squadron froze, their captains screaming for retreat. The squadron turned to flee, but the void did not allow them to escape. Another beam lanced out, then another. Ships exploded like toys, their debris scattering into the blackness. In minutes, the mighty fleet of the Empire was reduced to nothing more than burning wreckage. Only one ship survived long enough to send a desperate message, the voice of its captain breaking with fear as he shouted the words, "It's human, the Terrans have returned." Before his ship too was silenced, the message slipped past the Empire's sensors, spreading across the stars before they could contain it. On conquered worlds, the people listened in awe, their eyes wide, their hearts racing. The invincible armada had been struck, and struck hard. The rebels began to rise again, whispering the same name, Terran. In the Empire's war halls, the admirals raged, calling for vengeance, demanding that the shadow ship be hunted down. But their younger officers could not hide the tremble in their hands. They had seen the footage. A single Terran battleship wiping out a squadron in minutes, and they knew the truth. No number of ships would ever be enough. The ruler of the Empire stood before his generals, his voice thunderous, demanding loyalty, demanding belief. He declared that the Terrans were only one ship, one relic of the past. and that the Empire would crush it as they crushed all others. But even as he spoke, shadows of doubt filled the chamber. For every general there had seen the recordings. They had seen the blasts cut through their strongest warships like paper. And none could silence the question rising in their hearts. If this was only one Terran battleship, what would happen if more followed? Far beyond the Empire's reach, the battleship drifted in silence once more, its cannons cooling, its engines humming softly. Deep inside its ancient halls, lights flickered awake, voices of its crew whispering through long-abandoned corridors. They were not ghosts. They were real. They were human. And they had waited long enough. The galaxy that had betrayed them would now learn to fear them again. For the Terran battleship was not a myth, it was here. And this was only the beginning. The silence after the destruction of the Empire's border squadron spread across the galaxy faster than light. No matter how much the rulers tried to cover the truth, the message had already escaped. A single Terran battleship had been seen, it had fought, and it had won. Entire fleets that once carried the Empire's banner across the stars now whispered the same question. If one ship could do this, what would happen if more came? The thought alone was enough to shake the confidence of soldiers who once believed themselves invincible. On the ruined border outpost, wreckage still floated like shattered bones in the void. Patrols sent to recover the remains found nothing but burned fragments and dead silence. Yet even in that silence, their scanners twitched with strange interference, as if the void itself hummed with a heartbeat. Many refused to continue their work, fearful that the Terran battleship was still nearby, watching them from the shadows. When the Admiralty heard this, they gave strict orders. No talk of humans, no mention of Terrans, no acknowledgement of the truth. But words have a way of escaping chains. And these words carried hope to the conquered. On planets deep within the Empire's core, slaves and broken rebels lifted their heads for the first time in years. Songs returned to streets where silence had once ruled. In secret meeting places, old fighters spoke of preparing for battle again. They told their children that the humans were real, that a ship older than empires had risen from the dark, and that the Empire's days were numbered. Even the most hopeless among them felt a spark of fire return to their chests. The Terrans had not forgotten them, and if the humans had returned, then maybe freedom had a chance. The Empire's high command was in chaos. Reports clashed with one another. Some said it was only a relic ship, a ghost that could not last. Others argued it was the beginning of something far larger. One general slammed his fist against the table, reminding them of what history had once said, that Terran ships were not mere machines, but titans of war, that they carried weapons that bent physics itself, and that even entire empires had fallen under their guns. Silence filled the chamber as the older admirals nodded, each recalling battles from legends that had haunted them since their cadet years. At last, the ruler himself spoke, his voice trembling with anger but also with the edge of fear. He declared that if the humans had returned, they must be hunted down and destroyed before hope could spread any further. Fleets were ordered to mobilize. Thousands of ships gathered at the Empire's core, and plans were made to scour the borders until the Terran ship was found. But the admirals who spoke in private admitted what none would say in public. They could send 1,000 ships, but against a Terran battleship, it might still not be enough. Meanwhile, the ship itself had moved deeper into the Empire's reach, its presence cloaked in shadows, but not silent, for it left traces, faint signals, bursts of static, and sometimes, when it chose, a voice, short messages sent into the dark, old codes carried through frequencies the Empire could not block, messages that conquered people began to hear. We endure, we are coming, you are not alone. And with every word, the galaxy trembled, some in fear, others in hope, but no one could ignore it anymore. On one conquered world, rebellion rose overnight. Rebels armed with Terran weapons hidden for decades stormed an Empire garrison. Their rifles cut through armored soldiers with frightening ease. The battle was short, and for the first time, the Empire retreated. The people raised a flag not of their own, but a simple white banner painted with the mark of humanity. The image spread across systems like wildfire, and soon entire colonies whispered of revolt, each one waiting for the Terran battleship to appear above their skies. The Empire responded with fury, burning cities and slaughtering those who dared to speak of Terrans. But every act of cruelty only fueled the fire, for the people now knew the truth. The invincible armada was not invincible. There was something greater, something older, and it was human. In their desperation, the Empire threw fleets into the void, hunting shadows. Yet every time they thought they had cornered the battleship, their ships vanished, wreckage floating silently as proof of failure. The Terran warship was not only alive, it was playing with them, testing their strength, breaking their confidence piece by piece. On the bridge of the battleship itself, silence ruled except for the steady hum of its ancient core. Its crew moved like shadows, disciplined, patient, their faces hidden behind the glow of long-forgotten technology. They did not rush, they did not panic. They knew time was their greatest weapon. With every battle, with every whisper, with every glimpse of their ship across the stars, the Empire weakened itself, its fear spreading faster than any weapon could fire. Humanity had waited for centuries. They could wait a little longer still. The ruler of the Empire stood before his people, broadcasting his face across every world under his control. His voice boomed as he declared that the Empire would not fall, that no ghost of the past could threaten them. He promised the Terran ship would be destroyed. His words were sharp, full of pride. But behind his eyes there was something no broadcast could hide, fear, and those who watched him saw it. They whispered to one another that even their ruler believed the stories now, that even he feared the Terrans had truly returned. And far beyond, in the silent void, the battleship drifted once more, watching, waiting, its cannons ready, its engines burning softly like the breath of a sleeping giant. It had not yet revealed its full strength. It had not yet unleashed its fury, but when it did, the galaxy would remember why humanity had once been feared above all others, and why no empire, no matter how vast, could ever stand against them. The Empire had grown desperate, and desperation made even the strongest rulers reckless. Fleets were assembled in numbers never seen before. Thousands upon thousands of warships pulled from every corner of their vast domain, carriers, destroyers, frigates, all gathered together under the command of the Empire's most decorated admiral. Their goal was simple. They were to find the Terran battleship, surround it, and crush it in one final strike. The admirals told themselves that sheer numbers would be enough, that no single ship could survive the firepower of an entire armada. Yet even as they spoke the words aloud, none of them truly believed it. Across the galaxy, people whispered of what was coming. They said the Empire was calling its greatest fleet not for a war against rebels, not for conquest, but for fear of a single ship. They said the Terran battleship would not run, it would face them, and when it did, the galaxy would change forever. Rebels sharpened their weapons, slaves sang in secret, and on the quiet edges of space, broken worlds lifted their eyes to the stars, waiting for the light of vengeance to fall upon the Empire. The great fleet moved through the void like a storm, its engines blazing, its weapons armed. Endless rows of ships stretched across black space until they looked like a metal horizon. Their admiral stood tall in the command tower, his voice echoing with orders, his hands trembling behind his back. He had studied history. He had seen the records of battles long buried. He knew what a single Terran ship could do, but he could not speak it aloud. His duty was to lead, and so he shouted for courage, while fear ate at his soul. Then it appeared, not with fanfare, not with thunder, but with silence, a shadow drifting at the edge of their formation, massive and scarred, yet alive. The Terran battleship moved slowly, like a predator circling prey. Its lights flickered awake one by one, its engines glowing with an ancient fire. The entire Empire fleet froze for a heartbeat, staring at the ghost that had haunted their nightmares. Then the admiral gave the order, all ships open fire, and the void lit up like a second sun. Missiles, beams, and plasma storms filled the blackness, thousands of weapons crashing against the lone Terran ship. Explosions wrapped its hull in endless fire. For a moment the admiral believed they had succeeded, that no ship could withstand such a storm. But then the fire cleared, and the battleship still stood, its armor glowing red, its shields flaring, but unbroken. The Empire fleet fell into silence as the Terran ship shifted, its cannons turning slowly, deliberately, and then the true battle began. The first volley from the Terran guns shattered an entire wing of destroyers, their screams silenced in an instant as fire ripped through them. The Empire's formations broke apart, panic spreading as ship after ship vanished into wreckage. The Terran battleship moved forward, its weapons striking with perfect precision, every shot a death sentence, every beam a reminder that this was no ordinary ship. It was a weapon forged for wars that the current galaxy could not even imagine. Empire commanders shouted for regrouping, for focus, but their voices were drowned by the chaos of dying crews. Their fleet that had once conquered worlds now tore itself apart in fear. Collisions, misfires, desperate retreats, all under the shadow of the battleship. The admiral screamed for calm. His eyes locked on the giant that carved through his fleet like a blade through paper. But deep inside he knew they were already finished. He had led his men into the jaws of a legend, and there was no escape. The Terran ship unleashed weapons the Empire had never seen. Lances of energy that ripped through multiple ships at once, torpedoes that vanished into the void only to reappear inside enemy hulls, detonating with monstrous force. Entire squadrons fell in seconds, and each time they thought they had found a weakness, the battleship adapted, shifting its shields, redirecting its power, fighting with a mind sharper than any admiral could match. It was not just a machine, it was a predator, and it was feeding on them. For hours the battle raged, but the outcome had been decided in the first minutes, when fear took hold of the Empire's soldiers, when they realized that numbers meant nothing before a Terran warship. By the time the battle ended, the void was filled with wreckage, burning fragments of thousands of ships drifting silently. Survivors fled into the darkness, their voices breaking as they cried out warnings. The humans are back, the Terrans have returned. No fleet can stop them, their words. Carried across channels, across systems, spreading faster than the Empire could silence. In the halls of the Empire's throne, the ruler listened to the reports in silence, his face pale, his hands gripping the arms of his throne until they cracked. His admirals knelt before him, broken, defeated, their once proud voices trembling as they admitted the truth. Their invincible armada had been destroyed by one ship. The ruler roared with rage, calling for vengeance, for retribution. But even as his words thundered, the people watching knew. He was not roaring from strength. He was roaring from fear. And far away, drifting through the silence of victory, the Terran battleship powered down its weapons, its engines glowing softly, its crew walking through ancient corridors with steady steps. They did not celebrate, they did not cheer. They simply prepared for what was to come. For they knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The galaxy had been reminded of their name, and soon, every star, every empire, every world would remember what it meant to face humanity in war. The galaxy shook with the aftermath of the great battle. Word of the Empire's defeat spread like a wildfire that no force could contain. In taverns, in slave camps, in broken cities where hope had long been buried, voices rose again. The invincible armada was gone, shattered by a single Terran battleship. For the first time in generations, the conquered looked at the sky not with despair, but with fire in their eyes. Whispers turned into chants, chants into cries, and cries into rebellion. On a desert world once stripped bare by the Empire, miners threw down their tools and picked up weapons. Rebels stormed the governor's palace, shouting the name Terran as they drove the Empire's soldiers into retreat. In the ice fields of Vika, workers rose from the mines, carrying fragments of human technology like sacred relics. Their voices joined together, singing songs of defiance that had not been heard in centuries, across hundreds of worlds. The same thing was happening. The galaxy was rising, emboldened by the shadow of a ship that had reminded them what true power looked like. The Empire's governors begged for reinforcements, but none came, for the fleets that once stretched endlessly across the stars were gone. Broken wreckage drifting silently in the void. The Empire tried to send soldiers, but even their most loyal troops hesitated now. Fear clouded their eyes, doubt filled their hearts. They had seen what one Terran battleship could do, and many wondered, if one could destroy thousands, how many more might be hidden, waiting to strike. The ruler of the Empire sat in his throne hall, his voice rising in fury as he declared that the Empire was still strong, that the Terrans were nothing but a ghost from the past. But his words were hollow. His eyes betrayed the fear he tried to hide. His generals avoided his gaze, for they too had seen the reports. They knew the truth. The Empire was bleeding, and nothing could stop it. Rebellions spread faster than fire, and every rebellion carried the same banner, the belief that the humans had returned. In secret councils, rebel leaders who had once been hunted now stood tall. They spoke of plans to unite their scattered forces, to strike the Empire's supply lines, to free the slaves, to burn the banners of their conquerors. Their voices carried strength they had not felt in years, and each of them swore the same oath. When the Terrans called, they would fight by their side. For if one ship could break the Empire's pride, then together, they could break its chains forever. Meanwhile, the Terran battleship drifted through the void, its engines silent, its weapons cooling, its crew calm and patient. They did not rush into glory. They did not chase after the broken fleets. They waited, watching, letting the galaxy do their work for them. For the humans understood something the Empire never had. True power was not only in weapons. It was in belief, and belief was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Across the stars, rumors grew wilder. Some said there were not one but many Terran ships, hidden in forgotten systems, waiting for the right moment to return. Others swore they had seen human soldiers walking among the rebels, guiding them, training them, though few could prove it. The belief was stronger than any truth, and it fueled the galaxy's fire. Every story, every whisper, every rumor tore another piece from the Empire's grip. In the great halls of command, the Empire's admirals argued bitterly. Some demanded they retreat and defend only their core worlds. Others called for a desperate strike to destroy the Terran battleship once and for all. But their voices were drowned by the growing chaos outside. Colonies falling, rebellions rising, trade routes cut, even loyal governors beginning to question their allegiance. The empire that had once seemed eternal now cracked and splintered before their eyes. The ruler refused to admit defeat. He ordered his fleets to gather once more. He demanded that spies hunt down the Terran battleship, that assassins strike at rebel leaders, that the galaxy be silenced. But no matter how many orders he gave, the truth could not be buried. The Terrans were back, and their presence was more powerful than any command. The Empire's time was running out. On the bridge of the Terran battleship, the crew stood in silence as reports reached them from across the galaxy. Worlds rising, fleets falling apart, rebels chanting their name. The captain looked out into the stars, his voice steady as he said the words that echoed through the ancient corridors, "They remember us." His officers nodded, their faces hard, for they knew this was not the end. This was the beginning of a storm that would tear the Empire apart. A storm born not from fire, but from hope. The galaxy had waited for centuries, but it no longer waited in silence. It had found its voice again. It had found its courage again, and soon, with the Terrans leading the way, it would find its freedom again. And in the quiet dark beyond the stars, the battleship's engines began to glow. Its cannons hummed softly, and the galaxy knew the next battle was coming. The galaxy had changed forever. The invincible empire was no longer untouchable. Its fleets were broken, its people restless, its colonies burning with rebellion, and at the heart of it all, the shadow of a single Terran battleship haunted their skies. The rulers tried to tighten their grip, but the harder they squeezed, the more worlds slipped from their grasp. No command, no punishment, no terror could stop the tide of defiance now. For the people no longer feared the empire. They feared something greater, and yet they welcomed it. Humanity had returned. The ruler sat in his throne hall, his crown heavy upon his brow, surrounded by trembling generals and broken admirals. They whispered of lost fleets, of rebellions that spread like wildfire, of supply lines cut, of governors switching sides to join the uprising. But the ruler refused to hear their words. His voice thundered across the chamber, declaring that the empire would not fall, that the Terran battleship would be destroyed. But his words rang hollow, for behind his anger, there was fear. And everyone in the chamber could see it. Desperate, the empire gathered what remained of its strength. Fleets pulled back from the edges, armies recalled from distant worlds, everything poured into one last defense. They fortified their throne world, surrounding it with a shield of steel, hundreds of warships forming a ring around the capital. Their weapons locked outward, waiting for the shadow to appear. They told themselves that here, at the heart of their empire, they would make their final stand. They would end the Terran threat. Once and for all. The people watched from the shadows of their ruined homes. They waited, holding their breath, and then the signal came, faint at first, then stronger, a low vibration that echoed across the stars. The sound of ancient engines awakening. In the distance, beyond the ring of warships, a shadow stirred, larger than any fortress, older than any fleet. The Terran battleship had come. The Empire fired first, their cannons blazing, their missiles streaking through the void. The sky lit up with fire, but the battleship did not break. It moved through the storm with the patience of a predator, its shields flaring, its armor glowing. Then, with a roar that shook the silence, it answered. Its cannons unleashed a storm unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Beams of energy tore through the Empire's defenses. Warships split apart like toys. Entire formations vanished in seconds. The Empire fought with fury, but fury could not change the truth. Their weapons were nothing before the Terran guns. Their fleets shattered one by one. Their admirals screamed for regrouping, for courage. But their voices faded into silence as their ships became wreckage. The sky around the throne world became a graveyard of burning steel. And still the battleship advanced, unstoppable, unbroken, ancient and terrifying in its might. On the surface of the throne world, the people looked up in awe as the night sky burned with falling wreckage. They heard the Empire's soldiers shouting in panic. They saw the once proud banners torn from their walls, and they knew the end had come. Hope surged through their hearts as they chanted a single word, Terran. Their voices rising louder than the thunder of war, for they no longer saw the humans as myths, they saw them as saviors. The ruler of the Empire stood at the window of his palace, his eyes wide as the Terran battleship descended through the smoke-filled sky. Its shadow falling across his city, he screamed in rage, swearing that the Empire would never bow. But even his own guards no longer listened. They threw down their weapons, some fled, others fell to their knees, for they knew there was no power left that could resist. The battleship hovered above the capital, its cannons glowing with restrained fire. But it did not fire upon the city. It waited, silent and patient. The message was clear. The humans had not come to destroy, they had come to reclaim, and in that silence, the galaxy understood. The age of the Empire was over. The age of humanity had returned. Across the stars, rebellions roared to life, colonies tore down the Empire's banners. Fleets of rebels surged from hiding to strike their oppressors. The Empire's rule crumbled piece by piece, and every victory was marked by the shadow of the Terran battleship. Its presence enough to ignite courage where there had once been only despair, its silence louder than the Empire's roar. The ruler of the Empire, broken and defeated, tried to flee, but the Terran battleship was faster. Its shadow fell upon his escaping vessel. A single beam of light pinned it in the void, and in an instant, the ship was gone, leaving nothing but silence behind. With his death, the Empire collapsed completely, its soldiers scattering, its governors fleeing, its chains finally broken. And so the galaxy stood at the dawn of a new era, the people free, the Empire gone, and above them all, the Terran battleship drifted in silence, its lights glowing softly, its engines humming with ancient power. Humanity had not only returned, it had taken back its place among the stars. The galaxy would never forget this day, the day when no fleet could stop them, the day when one ship brought an empire to its knees, and in the quiet that followed, a single truth remained: the humans were back, and the stars would never be the same.